Welcome everybody to today's webinar where we will discuss the AmeriCorps state formula and competitive programs for our new grantees. The title of this webinar is Starting Strong. So welcome everyone and let's get started. Next slide, please. We have a pretty extensive agenda today. We will start out with brief introductions of what this orientation will consist of. Then we will have an overview of CERB-DC, CNCS, and the AmeriCorps program. We will move into grant agreements and then program and budget modifications, followed by your payment requirements, grant management, most particularly the eGrants portal, member management, CERB-DC and CNCS compliance, CERB-DC staff goals, expectations, ways to communicate, and then have a list of resources at the very end. Next slide, please. What is CERB-DC? CERB-DC is the State Service Commission for Washington, D.C. State service commissions are the state partners of the federal agency, the Corporation for National and Community Service, which oversees the state commissions as well as the national service initiatives throughout the country. State service commissions serve at the state level and granting more than $250 million from federal national service funds, in addition to local funds to support citizen service and volunteerism in America. Next slide, please. What does national service look like? The Corporation for National and Community Service is the federal grant-making agency, which was created in 1993 by the National and Community Service Trust Act, signed by then President Clinton. It is the nation's largest grant maker for service and volunteering. The programs that are under the National Service Portfolio in CNCS include the AmeriCorps program, the Volunteer Generation Fund, AmeriCorps Vista, and the Retired Senior Volunteer programs. Also other programs under national service, such as NCCC and a FEMA NCCC program. Next slide, please. For the program year 2020, CNCS listed out certain funding priorities that it would like to see the AmeriCorps programs address. The first one is economic opportunity. The second is education. The third, healthy futures. Fourth, veterans and military families. Fifth, rural intermediaries. Sixth, safer communities. And the last one is faith-based organizations. Next slide, please. These are a few of the AmeriCorps terms and concepts that you should familiarize yourself with as an AmeriCorps grantee. An AmeriCorps program is an organization that has received an AmeriCorps grant and it operates a service program. A grantee is the direct recipient of grant funds. For example, CERB-DC, as the State Service Commission, is the grantee of the AmeriCorps program funding. And then we have sub-grantees or operating sites, which are the local organizations that implement the grant activities on the local level. So if CERB-DC is the direct recipient of the grant funds as a grantee, the actual AmeriCorps programs that implement the grant activities at the local level are known as sub-grantees. And then you have service locations, which are the places in the community where your AmeriCorps members go to complete their service activities. Next slide, please. This slide goes over the AmeriCorps state national grant terms. The first are the grant periods, which are typically done in 3-year cycles. The grants, however, are awarded for up to 1 year at a time based on performance and if the funds are available at the federal level. Continued funding requests must be annual. Members and personnel that are budgeted in their grant, both from the CNCS or federal side and the match side, which comes from the subgrantee, must be cleared for what we call national service criminal history checks. These include your NSOPW, your state check, and your FBI check. All of this must happen before your member begins service and before your personnel begins to administer the grant. Serve DC and state commissions do have separate grant terms and requirements from CNCS. This you will see within your grant agreement that you must sign before you begin to administer your program. There are then two systems that Serve DC, CNCS, and you as a program will use throughout the year to comply with CNCS and Serve DC rules and regulations and to keep track of your program and your members. The first is eGrants, and the second is Encore. Then the next column goes more towards what you have put into your grant application, and then what you are going to be fulfilling throughout the program year. The first is you have your program narrative, where you discuss what your project scope will be and what the members will be performing. Have your performance measures, and you aligned measure for primary service activity. You then have your program budget, which includes your budget narrative. And then within the eGrant system, you have what is the My AmeriCorps portal. This is the system where you go in to do your member enrollment and exiting. You have your service site listings, and then you also are able to manage slots. We will discuss a little more in depth later in the slides, the eGrant system, and how to do your member management through the My AmeriCorps portal. However, there is a link on this slide for the My AmeriCorps tutorials, which we do suggest that you as a new program familiarize yourself with. Next slide, please. Now we will move into the grant agreements that you as a program must enter into with Serve DC as the State Service Commission. Next slide, please. There are several key terms and information within the grant agreement that you need to be made aware of. The first is, of course, contact information for both the program and Serve DC, the award amount that you were given, the scope of the work. We do list reporting and payment schedules, as well as overall standards of performance and your period of performance, which will last the program year. We list your method of payment, ways in which your agreement might be terminated or payments suspended. And then we also list eligible and allowable costs and disallowed costs. I want to take a moment over the next couple of slides to go over the last two terms on here: eligible allowable costs and disallowed costs. Next slide, please. In general, a cost is allowable if it meets the following criteria. It is reasonable and necessary for the performance of the grant award. It conforms to the limitations and exclusions within the award as to types or amounts of cost items. It is consistent with the fiscal regulations of CNCS and the DC government. And of course, it is documented adequately. Next slide, please. Unallowable costs or disallowed costs are disallowed allocations that do not comply with the grant provisions and OMB requirements. And they are costs that have been charged or matched in grant, which can be questioned or disallowed following an audit. We have listed out some of the most common unallowable costs. We do encourage that you familiarize yourself with these. I will not go through this list, but please ensure that when you are going to document the costs that you wish to have reimbursed, that you ensure that they are allowable costs and not unallowable costs, which listed here on this slide, but then we also have them listed in your program director handbook, which accompanies your grant agreement. Next slide, please. You also have a list of prohibited activities that are activities that staff, members, and volunteers may not engage in while charging time to the AmeriCorps program, accumulating service or training hours, or otherwise performing activities supported by the AmeriCorps program or CNCS. These activities include political activity and advocacy, religious activity, benefiting for-profit entities, voter registration, or abortion services. Next slide, please. Now we will move on to program and budget modifications. Next slide, please. If you wish to modify either your program or your budget, all approvals must be made by amendment to the grant agreement. For programmatic changes, if you have been awarded a formula grant, you must request a modification in writing to SERV-DC. An email is acceptable. SERV-DC must then approve the modification before you report this in your progress report. Please reference the 2020-2021 AmeriCorps Program Director Handbook, which has further information on what is required as a formula program if you would wish to modify the program aspect of your grant. Next are for the competitive programs. You must submit the modification to SERV-DC for review. Depending upon what the programmatic change is, final approval must be obtained by CNCS program and grants officers. Again, please reference the 2020-2021 AmeriCorps Program Director Handbook, which has further information on when you have to submit a modification for approval by CNCS. And also at the very bottom, we want to remind everyone to please see the terms and conditions for AmeriCorps national grants or acceptable programmatic changes. These terms and conditions will be sent to you along with the grant agreement and the AmeriCorps Program Director Handbook. Next slide, please. Budgetary changes. As with an approved budget, a modification must provide a full explanation of associated costs, including the purpose, justification, and the basis of the new calculations. Who approves the budget modification? For both formula and competitive programs, a program is allowed to modify its budget without CNCS approval if SERV-DC is notified of this modification in writing, and if the modification meets the following criteria: does not change the total federal, which is the CNCS share, or grantee share, otherwise known as match, and it modifies a direct budget line item by less than 10% of the total budget. On the other hand, a program must have CNCS approval for the following: you modify a direct budget line item by more than 10% of the budget total, you are paying overtime, or you purchase equipment over $5,000 using your grant fund, unless this has been specified in the approved application budget. Next slide, please. Programs may transfer funds among direct cost categories when the cumulative amount of transfers does not exceed 10% of the total budget. If you are a fixed amount program, programs with fixed amount grants are not subject to the budget modification requirements that were listed in the previous slide. Next slide, please. Payment requirements. Next slide, please. For the reimbursement process, this is a two-level process. The first is the grants management specialist at CERDC reviews the reimbursement or invoice that you send in each month. This is for a cost reimbursement grant. We do receive these reimbursement requests every month, unlike a fixed amount grant where there is a fixed time throughout the program year when we receive reimbursement requests. To start, the grants management specialist will review and ensure that the budget is abiding by the match rule. Then check all receipts to ensure they add up to the claim. Afterwards, the specialist reviews the member timesheets and Encore to ensure staff are charging hours and not percentages. Then we must verify if the subgrantee is spending within the budget categories, and then check to see if the grantee request for funding matches the PER, which is in Encore. This ends the first step of this two-level process. The second level, it then goes to the Office of Finance and Resource Management, which is essentially the finance department of the district, which then in turn actually pays the claim. Once OFRM pays the claim, they will send this payment report. Once the payment report is received, the grants manager or the grants management specialist verify if the subgrantees have been paid. This is a very watered down version of how the reimbursement process works to give you an overview of what to expect. However, you will receive a more thorough and detailed step-by-step process for your reimbursement when you do receive your grant approval. Next slide, please. Grant management. Next slide. As mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, the eGrants portal is an online system that is designed to streamline recruitment, enrollment, and member management. This eGrants system is what CERDC as well as CNCS uses to do the following. It creates the service opportunities. It allows you to recruit and accept member applications. This is also where you go to enroll and place your members at service sites. It creates and approves service changes. You exit your members through the eGrants portal. And then overall, you are providing member and program oversight. Next slide, please. The My AmeriCorps portal for your AmeriCorps members. The purpose and member action steps. You first register on My AmeriCorps. Then they would search and apply for service, accept or reject service invitations. Members also are able to enroll, complete their service and the exit survey. They exit service and receive award through this system. And then they also are able to receive alumni services. We have put the website page here for prospective members for reference for you, as well as reference for any member that you are wishing to join your program. Next slide, please. We're now going into member management, where I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Tracy, who will discuss the next few slides.
Good afternoon. Congratulations on your new grant award. I'm excited to be working with you and learning more about your program. The next few slides, I will be going over member management. Successful member management is one of the most critical elements of an AmeriCorps program. Our discussion today will focus on understanding where to find information about the program requirements related to member management. As members are the cornerstones of every program, you will need to spend a significant amount of time at a program startup development system and AmeriCorps members are individuals enrolled in a specific term of service with an AmeriCorps program. The term of service is between 300 and 1,700 hours. AmeriCorps members are engaged in national service and are not volunteers or employees. They play a unique role in a community or organization to address unmet needs. Eligible AmeriCorps members can receive a living allowance, health insurance, and child care assistance to support them during their term of service. In addition, AmeriCorps members receive a single AmeriCorps Education Award upon successfully completing a term of service. The value of an education award is tied to Pell Grant. Full-time members, those requiring 1,700 hours of service, receive the maximum value of people. Education awards are prorated for lesser terms of service. The maximum value of the award for each term of service appears each year in the AmeriCorps Notice of Funding Opportunity. Member application and enrollment via AmeriCorps process. This flowchart is designed to guide you through the AmeriCorps member enrollment process in the AmeriCorps portal. Please begin the member enrollment process as soon as possible after grant notification. This includes taking proactive steps to plan for member recruitment, citizenship verification, and national service criminal history check processes well in advance of your expected member start date. Note, members who are previously served in AmeriCorps must ensure that they are exited from their previous program in My AmeriCorps. Member enrollment and criminal history check verification. Member enrollment is a person who is eligible to enroll as an AmeriCorps member who is a U.S. citizen, who is at least 17 years of age, and has a high school diploma or GED. Programs must insert and document the eligibility of all its members, verify Social Security number validity and citizenship eligibility automatically or by hand and email when a member accepts invitation. Before AmeriCorps members' first day of service, please complete the National Sex Offenders Public website, the NSOPW, state and FBI background check. Also, verify these steps are completed in each Certify member enrollment no later than the 8th calendar day from member start date. Types of criminal history check and who must be checked. Program staff must certify that each member's required NSOPW has been run, reviewed, and approved, as well as the state FBI criminal history check. All cover position checks must include a nationwide name-based check of the NSOPW, which consists of a web-based check of a centralized system that identifies individuals who are registered as sex offenders in states, territories, or with many federally recognized crimes. A statewide criminal history registry as a candidate state of residence and in the state where the individual will serve or work, and a fingerprint-based FBI check. Which checks are required for individuals in covered positions without reoccurring access to vulnerable populations? The statutory requirement is for programs to conduct a check with two components: nationwide name-based check of the NSOPW and a search of the statewide criminal history registry and the candidate state of residence and in the state where the person will serve or work, or a fingerprint-based FBI check. With access to vulnerable populations, statutory requirement is for programs to conduct a check with three components: nationwide name-based check of the NSOPW, a search of the statewide criminal history registry and the candidate's state of residence, and in the state where the person will serve or work, and a fingerprint-based FBI check. Vulnerable populations are people 17 or younger, 60 and older, and people who have a disability. Member screening. Programs must conduct screenings of prospective members as part of the recruitment and selection process. National Criminal History Check, National Sex Offenders Public Website, the NSOPW. Check complete prior to the start date. State and or FBI checks initiated prior to the start of service. Details can be found on the National Criminal History Check map. National Service Criminal History Check. NSOPW completion and state FBI check initiation must be certified by checking the relevant boxes on the member enrollment form no later than the member's start date. Remember to click Save Information, checking the boxes. The member's start date cannot be earlier than this date. CNCS strongly recommend programs to establish two-screen and field-print accounts to use for and compliant National Service Criminal History Checks. Failure to conduct timely and compliant National Criminal History Checks may delay member enrollment and result in cause disallowance. CNCS disallowance determination. The purpose of this guide is to explain how to resolve National Service Criminal History Check findings. Self-reporting occurs when a grantee reports non-compliance to the grant manager prior to any written notice of future oversight or monitoring activity. Standard disallowance occurs when a grantee is found non-compliant during a monitoring site visit. Mitigation levels. This guide applies to all National Service Criminal History Check non-compliance findings identified through oversight and monitoring for non-reoccurring and reoccurring access to vulnerable populations. True screens and field print resources. Please see below on how to sign up and learn about the process as well as the turnaround time. Exit and members. All members must complete an exit interview, member evaluation, and a member exit form. Please keep in mind, members' exit date coincides with final date of service on the timesheet. Also, members' total hours on timesheet and their time log matches the exit form. Terms of service. Grantees ensure that members sign a service agreement before beginning their term of service so that the member is fully aware of their rights and responsibilities. Their Siegel AmeriCorps Education Award provided to members who successfully completed a term of service in AmeriCorps. The amount of education award is dependent on specific term of service or slot type in which an individual serves, full-time, half-time, etc. Full-time members receive the maximum value of the Siegel Award. Education awards are prorated for lesser terms of service. Members are required to commit to completing hours and completing the term of service and comply with any pre-service orientation or training required by CNCS. For all exits, you must indicate the eagerness that you will recommend them for another term of service. Compliance. Being proactive proactive and having comprehensive monitoring tools will benefit 100% for compliance. Your AmeriCorps monitoring system should include all of these listed below: recruitment, selection, eligibility, enrollment for members, tracking member hours, exiting members, developing and implementing member training, member supervision, tracking, recording, and reporting progress, site partner management, continuous improvement, financial management systems, documentation of matching funds, and reimbursement. What we're looking for: eligibility and enrollment documentation, change in status, exit and egress within 30 days, background check compliance, member contract signed on or before the enrollment date, member benefit, timesheet signed by member and supervisor, member performance reviews, midterm and interim evaluations, financial management, policies and procedures, audit information, federal financial report, FFRs, and periodic expense reports, PERs, batch requirements, and data collection track. Here are some monitoring examples of how service will monitor your program: site visits, timesheet reviews and verifications, written reports, desk reviews, and ongoing communication, so that we all can stay 100% compliant with federal and state terms and conditions. Your reporting systems need to demonstrate evidence of the data that was reported on the most recent progress report, demonstrate the program is on track for collecting data and reporting and meeting stated objectives, and dedicate responsibility for your data collection. Reporting requirements. Here's a list of all your rescheduled reporting requirements, along with reporting periods, due dates, and how to submit all your reports. Semiannual progress report. It is imperative that grantees document and track data throughout the program in order to report accurately. What to include: data and qualitative information, describe progress if a measure is not yet met, submit an encore, and contact grant management specialist or national service director if you would like to change performance measures. Performance measures. AmeriCorps programs are required to create performance measures to be tracked and reported on a biannual basis in the grantee progress report. Measures should focus on tracking primarily service activities of the AmeriCorps program, allowing the program to describe its impact on the beneficiaries of the service. AmeriCorps performance measures consist of output: amount of service beneficiaries reached, project completion or services delivered by a program, and outcomes: changes or benefits experienced by service beneficiaries, including change in knowledge, attitude, behavior, or condition. Applicants must select from CMCS-created national performance measures if their program design aligns with the outcome. Alternatively, grantees may create their own performance measures. All program systems are set up to connect and report data. A program design starts with your theory of change. A theory of change defines a cause and effect relationship between a specific intervention or service activity and an intended outcome to maintain a consistent schedule of system for collecting and storing data. If you need help with project models, current measures, and discuss possible changes to improve impact, please reach out to your grant manager for technical assistance. Also online technical assistance available for national performance measures. See the link below. Data collection. Where to find data? It is extremely important to use data and evidence to support the program design. Data should be used to document the needs of the community or to describe the problems your program will address. What type of data meets your evaluation? Existing data, external data sets, administrative data, and this data. It is essential to the program design that you will be able to show how the program is trying to express the service activities the program will provide and the anticipated outcomes related to one another. Data collection. What type of data? Quantitative data should be used as entity to the scope of the problem. Numerical information that can be counted, quantified, mathematically analyzed. Who is affected by the problem, and how many are directly affected? Qualitative data, the narrative information that describes the study of subject or subject and the context. How severe is the problem, and it is important that the need is documented and data is systematically collected, recorded, and analyzed. This is the end of my presentation, and now I will be turning it back over to my colleague, Jen. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Now we'll move on to Serve DC staff expectations. The role of the Serve DC National Service Director is as follows. The general expectations are to promote and amplify national service and AmeriCorps to external stakeholders, partners, and communication mediums. Successfully complete all programs as they are outlined in the approved AmeriCorps grant applications. Ensure compliance with CNCS administrative standards and grant regulations. Some examples of specific duties of the National Service Director: financial management, personnel management overseeing staff, strategic and operational planning and implementation, and oversight, monitoring, evaluating, and reporting. This includes for staff, programs, and in some instances, AmeriCorps members. Next slide, please. The role of the Serve DC Grants Management Specialist is to help commissions manage the communications and requests from multiple Serve DC and CS officials. The Grants Management Specialist is the primary point of contact at Serve DC for our national service programs. These are the key elements of the job: portfolio formula management, including technical assistance and training, and grant process support. In this capacity, the Grants Management Specialist monitors sub-grantee performance, such as portal compliance and progress on approved performance measures, reviews and clarifies grantee progress reports, connects the sub-grantees with resources and opportunities to support their work, and helps troubleshoot grant and program issues. Next slide, please. How do we work together? Communication is key. Your primary point of contact is your grants management specialist. However, we do encourage that our programs do the following: alert us to staff or AmeriCorps member or program changes. Always copy your GMS on emails that are sent to other Serve DC or CNCS staff. An immediate heads up on any unexpected developments. For example, an AmeriCorps member grievance of notice of investigation from the Office of the Inspector General. Whenever possible and as appropriate, engage your GMS in events, service projects, trainings, etc. Your GMS will contact you at least monthly for check-ins and maintain a schedule of monthly check-in calls. We also would love to hear any good news about your AmeriCorps members or your program. And please let us know when things are not going as planned so we can come in and help. Next slide, please. For ServDC staff, we provide a response to grantee reports within 60 days of receiving them. In the response, we acknowledge and comment briefly on the substance of the work. We respond to grantee email or phone inquiries within 1 business day, or send a notification that the ServDC staff member contacted is out of office. These several types of communication with your grants management specialist include online or database contact information, phone, email, and of course, in person. Next slide, please. Serve with ServDC. Throughout the program year, we will have seasons of service days. These service days include the Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service in January. We also have a Global Youth Service Day and DC Emancipation Day in April. September 11th, National Day of Service and Remembrance. And then World AIDS Day, which is in December. As part of the grant agreement with ServDC, you are required to have your AmeriCorps members attend at least one of these seasons of service days. However, we do encourage you to try to attend as many as possible. Next slide, please. ServDC prides itself on its robust, responsive social media presence, including on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Next slide, please. We wanted to provide you with some online resources. We do encourage you to please sign up for CNCS email listserv to stay informed. If you need to manage the AmeriCorps grant, also if you need to familiarize yourself with the grant terms and conditions, also grantee progress report resources, and then the AmeriCorps State and National Knowledge Network is a wonderful resource where it has a listing of different PowerPoints and webinars to really learn and familiarize yourself more with how to operate an AmeriCorps grant. Next slide, please. This is the ServDC National Service Team contact information. You have my information, Jenny Kessler, and Tracy Rollins-Johnson's information. If you have any questions, please contact ServDC via our email or our phone at these addresses and numbers. Next slide, please. We also have an AmeriCorps email address where you are free to email any general questions. This is AmeriCorps@dc.gov, and this is also maintained by the National Service staff. Next slide, please. We want to thank you all for joining our orientation presentation, and we want to wish everybody a successful program here. Thank you for joining.